Microsoft announcing it will begin offering its cloud computing customers AMD's AI chips, a move which will give users an alternative to Nvidia's processors. Microsoft is expected to announce more details at its Build developer conference next week. You're taking a look at shares of both companies here, moving higher pre-market, but AMD, the outsized move there, it's up by about 3.5% on this news. I did a lot of learning about actually what it takes for these artificial intelligence chips and the broader data center and what's taking place. Well, it's a cluster thing. Microsoft's clusters, apparently, of the AMD AI chips, they're going to be sold through this cloud computing service, of course, that Microsoft has, Azure here, and ultimately for AI models and applications to run, these businesses actually have to put together or cluster multiple GPUs here. So that from some of the great reporting out of Asia.
Yeah, and it's interesting here when it takes a look at ultimately what this could mean for AMD's business. AMD expects $4 billion in AI chip revenue this year, has said that the chips are powerful enough to train and run those large AI models. When you take a look at that and coupling that with exactly what this ultimately means here for this business here, we are expected to hear a little bit more details when Microsoft does hold its event, but clearly there's a lot of excitement surrounding the potential here of this partnership and what exactly that could ultimately mean here for both of these companies. And then you've also got to ask what this could mean here for Nvidia as well, and whether or not how much market share this could potentially take from them or pressure this could ultimately put on the business. Yeah,
I mean, I guess with the clustering that takes place in data centers, it's actually more advantageous to have multiple different types of chips running for the large language processing. So that is something that is far over my head. I would love to get an expert on that, but no doubt the stock movement is not over my head. You're taking a look at AMD shares as we were just a moment ago here, up pre-market 3.5% on this news. And you got to wonder how this company is also going to be drumming up some of the other major deals here that are similar or synonymous to what they've just been able to do with Microsoft. Year to date, company up by about 17% right now.
Microsoft is heating up the AI chip war between AMD and Nvidia, as the tech giant recently revealed that it will make AMD's AI accelerators available to Azure cloud customers. This surprise move, especially from an industry leader like Microsoft, positions AMD as a great and more affordable alternative to Nvidia's dominant AI chips. And this is one of the reasons why Wolfe Research analyst Chris Casso is bullish on AMD stock. In fact, he sees AMD shares hitting $210, representing over 25% upside from current levels. And he's not the only one. AMD's cutting-edge products and strategic partnerships have analysts and investors alike chomping at the bit, eagerly anticipating the company's next game-changing move. In today's video, we're going to go over this partnership between Microsoft and AMD and also talk about whether AMD stock is a buy now. But before we do that, if you want to keep up with AMD's latest updates and keep up with the stock market's latest news, you can follow our Twitter account. We post multiple times daily about the biggest changes and catalysts in the market, so click the follow button if you don't want to miss the newest market updates.
The news, too, that you're referencing is this story Reuters came out with that next week there's I think it's called the Build Developer Conference. And Microsoft is going to, according to Reuters, unveil a plan to allow some of their cloud providers to utilize some AMD GPUs in addition to some of the Nvidia partnerships that they have. And this is a huge potential win for AMD as they break in to that space with a very important player within AI. But it also goes to show that while Nvidia might be the one that everyone wants, if they can't bring something to market, eventually it pivots. And we've seen this on a macro basis too.
What do you mean? What do you mean I like your chips best, but I can't get them?
Another way to describe this, though, is, hey, look, there was manufacturing demand worldwide. Well, China was closed down longer than the rest of the world. Well, that demand had to find somewhere to go. So you've seen a pivot to India. You've seen a pivot to other markets. It's not necessarily just going to go back to China now as all those capacities built up in other places.
No, China hasn't made themselves any less risky.
And if you're an AMD investor, you're saying, hey, take your time, NVIDIA, because this is opportunity for AMD and Intel and other names to take advantage. So while I think this also highlights that, hey, look, this pie is just ever growing, and there's enough for all these companies to have a piece of it. It's just going to be, what does that market share look like? Microsoft in this same story has also talked about they're going to launch their own stuff.
Sure.
And this is another thing, too. You have expensive products with high margins, and you create a $2 trillion market cap. well,
someone's going to try to.
I'm going to start figuring out how to do this myself.
Some of these big companies with all this cash are going to say, why don't we make one of those?
Yeah.
Hire some of their people and start making our own.
Yeah, exactly right. And we're starting to see that. And it's not always going to be directly at the NVIDIAs, but the I think it was called the Maya chip that Microsoft's looking to roll out is actually looking directly at ARM. And potentially has 40%, according to them, more processing power. So this is not a story that we might even be, and this is the first inning, third, I don't know what inning we're in, but the story is not over, and it's ever evolving. So Intel was the king of this castle 10 years ago. All they seem to be doing is tripping over their own feet at the moment. NVIDIA
Incredible
and AMD
fall from grace.
Have gone, AMD in particular, which is the name we're talking about, has gone from David versus Goliath in the case of Intel and AMD to potentially the Goliath in the story, which is impressive.
By offering AMD's chips for AI workloads, Microsoft provides a high-profile endorsement for AMD's technology. And given Azure's size, with a 23% market share in the global cloud market, this partnership could boost AMD's data center GPU business greatly. Microsoft's timing is notable too, pitting AMD against Nvidia right before Nvidia's new Blackwell GPU launch. In the high-stakes AI chip race, Microsoft is using AMD as a counterweight to Nvidia's dominance. Looking ahead, Microsoft plans to unveil more information on its AMD partnership at its developer conference next week. Not only that, but it will also preview its own custom AI chip called Cobalt. Now, while Microsoft partnering up with AMD on something like this is great for AMD stock, it's not like they're abandoning Nvidia completely. When Nvidia's Blackwell GPUs were first announced, it was revealed that Microsoft would be one of the first companies to get their hands on the GPUs. The thing is, demand for Nvidia's chips is so high that they're rarely available, and many tech companies struggle to acquire them. So it's only natural that even Nvidia's biggest customers are making their own chips or turning to competitors like AMD to ensure that they have enough chips for heavy AI workloads. Regardless, this is a great opportunity for AMD, and it could help it take more market share from Nvidia. However, AMD still needs to demonstrate sustainable competitive advantages beyond any temporary technical or headline boost. Execution on roadmaps remains key, but by looking at what they have been doing recently, we're very sure that the company will keep growing, which will reflect positively on AMD stock. Wolf Research made a strategic move recently, swapping Nvidia with AMD on its prestigious list of top stocks, known as the Wolf Alpha List. This tactical shift comes in response to the relative stock price movements year to date, with Nvidia witnessing a significant surge. In their analysis, Wolf Research affirmed their positive views on both Nvidia and AMD. However, the remarkable rise in Nvidia's stock price, up approximately 90% year to date and 100% since its addition to the list in November 2023, prompted the firm to prioritize AMD for the time being. In fact, the equity research firm anticipates that the dominant competitive stance of Nvidia in AI will generate substantial demand and pricing leverage for its GPUs in the forthcoming years. But in the immediate term, analysts do not foresee exceptional performance. But how do they feel about AMD? Let's find out. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Investocracy.
A lot of this is just chatter post-earnings, and some of this does have to do with partnerships that have recently come to light. Microsoft just announced that it will integrate its new chip into its Azure cloud, and so I think that this is just an example of companies that are, starting to come out and say, yes, we're leveraging and we're using AMD's technology. This isn't just a one-horse race in NVIDIA. And so this is something that we're watching because consumers are increasingly talking about AMD. We also see a lot of chatter related to its Ryzen lineup. And some of that could be more specific to, just regular consumers who are using this for gaming or for, high-power computing on their personal devices and things like that. So it's good to see AMD in headlines on the large scale, so for companies who are leveraging its technologies, but also just for consumers who are using its technologies and continuing to say they're having a good experience. One thing that's not on here is a happiness chart, and AMD actually leads other names in our universe, even in NVIDIA, though NVIDIA is much larger and has a much larger consumer mind share for sure. AMD's happiness level is actually about 3 points higher.
On the other hand, Wolfe Research acknowledges that AMD faced temporary memory issues, which now seem to be resolved. Analysts foresee a plausible trajectory toward a $2 billion MI300 revenue run rate by year-end, which could serve as an incremental driver for the stock. Additionally, projections indicate server graphics revenue of about $4 billion for calendar year 2024 and $7.3 billion for 2025, with optimism surrounding the potential for upward AI revenue guidance revisions through the latter half of 2024. Furthermore, Wolfe Research anticipates AMD's growth to benefit from a cyclical recovery in server and client CPUs following inventory depletion and replenishment in the embedded market, particularly in the seasonally stronger second half of 2024. But the question still stands, is AMD stock a buy now? Let's find out. But first, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
Now it's time for our Cash Tag segment. I'd like to bring in the Vice President of Research at Likefolio.com, Miss Megan Brantley, to the show, who's going to regale us on a Friday about AI. You know, next week's going to be a big week, right? In discussions about AI and all things AI, we have to go to Likefolio for the data. Megan, what do you got for us?
So AI is probably the fastest growing trend that we're watching this year. I think this isn't necessarily a surprise. This was a trend that we were watching last year, and we continue to see it capture consumer interest. I know one chart that we passed along today, this really caught our eye in terms of the number of companies in the S&P 500 who are talking about AI on earnings calls, and that number I think is at 41%. But honestly, when I saw this, that seemed really low to me over all of the AI hype that we talk about and we hear. So we think there is still a tremendous tailwind, and we think that AI is still in its infancy. We think companies are still figuring out how to leverage this technology appropriately and effectively. And so we see continued tailwinds here for a lot of the names in its space. And I know that NVIDIA, this is the name that everybody loves to talk about. This is obviously the big dog in this fight, but we don't see this as a winner takes all type of a scenario. We see this as a rising tide lifting a lot of boats. And so this is, kind of how we approach AI right now.
Analysts expect AMD to report earnings per share of $5.56 in the next fiscal year. However, some analysts have forecasts indicating AMD's potential earnings could exceed $8 per share. Given these upbeat earnings projections, even if AMD's valuation declines somewhat, the stock price would likely experience significant appreciation if these earnings levels are achieved. Specifically, if AMD meets the consensus outlook for $5.56 in earnings per share, the stock could plausibly trade up to around $200 based on an expanded PE multiple. Meanwhile, if AMD manages to earn over $8 per share, as some analysts predict, that level of profitability could support a share price of $225 or perhaps up to $250 in 2025. However, there are risks to this upbeat scenario if growth slows or AMD encounters execution issues. But if AMD lives up to the bull case, significant share price appreciation seems likely over the next 12 to 18 months. To sum up, we can say that this new alliance between AMD and Microsoft highlights AMD's momentum in the data center GPU space. However, execution remains key as the AI chip war continues to heat up. Looking ahead, AMD has big opportunities but still needs to demonstrate sustainable competitive advantages. For now, we just have to keep a close eye on AMD's emerging partnerships and new product launches. So, what do you think? What are your expectations for AMD? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. If you would like to know more latest updates about AMD and what they have been up to, then go ahead and click on the next video on your screen.